Good morning, everybody. Evan Abrams here, joined as always by Kyle Hamrick. Welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. Kyle, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. All things considered.
Pretty good. And today, Kyle, we're getting into it. We're getting into it today.
It in question is, of course, us.
Yeah, we're getting into ourselves today. We're really going to be in our feelings. But good people of the chat, what we usually do on this program. Am I in the... Hold on. Maybe I need to work my body more into the center of the frame. Closer to the plant, away from the plant, whatever. What we usually do on this program is I am well centered in my frame, and we talk about motion design, After Effects, solving people's moving video problems right here. So if you have problems, you send them to us. We try to fix them. We got a form for that. You can enjoy that in the description. Where else can people find our stuff, Kyle?
At motiondesignhotline.com, which is, of course, a real website for real people like yourselves and ourselves.
We're real. We're about to get real. But yeah, thanks everyone for being with us in the chat. A
lot of the regular names here. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, Sean, Oliver, Clever Devlin, Cody Bear holding it down in the chat. And people over on YouTube, people over on Behance. Robert, what's going on? And Stian, Odegaard, I think. Let me know if I pronounced that bad, and then tell me the good pronunciation. I'm always trying to learn. But yeah, if you are new here, let us know who you are, where you're from, what you're doing. We want to know what's up.
You know what? Can I just take a second and enjoy a typo? What I assume is a typo.
Sure.
Be Cool Theo over on YouTube just typed, "What's food, y'all?" Which I assume was supposed to be good, but I really like this.
Guys, what's food, y'all?
Yeah. Sticking with it.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. That's a fun thing we do here. So let's have a look at our screens. Let's look at what we're doing. We are slicing into stuff. So there's this kind of collage technique. Let's jump over to my screen sort of first, because I got this thing queued up, and I've been staring at my bifurcated face for a while, so now you all have to look at it.
Honestly, same.
I'm just spending the whole day staring at my own bifurcated face. That this was the idea. We got an asset. We're going to slice it in half. We're going to see what's going on inside.
Put something weird inside.
Yeah, and it's gonna be something kind of abstracted or literal or whatever. But yeah, in this case, it is one of my favorite presets that I've ever made is the anime speed lines is inside my head.
Yep.
We just have to assume that this was what was going on while I was doing that. But the point of this is that you could come in here and you could put anything inside here, like. Maybe I'm thinking about Kyle, so I'm going to just put a picture of Kyle inside my head, which could be a nice thing. So if we go back to here, yeah, there's kind of a stretched out image of Kyle inside my head.
That sort of works. That might need a little fine tuning there.
But. Yeah, here we go. I'll just make him a little bit wider, and then we'll go back to here. Yeah, that's a little bit more appropriate. So yeah, now I'm just thinking about Kyle experiencing speed. The true feeling of speed, and then it goes back inside my brain.
Yeah. Maybe I'm watching the movie Speed.
Exactly, Speed Racer. Actually, this is much more Speed Racer vibes.
It is. Yeah.
So anyway, that's one thing to do. That requires an image sequence to make that one work, but you could do it just with a static photo. So what's going on inside Kyle's brain? Well, here's a static picture of his face, and his brain's full of dinos, as we know.
And this is kind of the most common version of this. You know, we've seen that a lot, especially in these kind of collage-style explainer videos where you need to kind of show what someone's thinking about or what takes place inside this building or whatever. You can kind of slice it in an unrealistic and fun way and then put something wacky inside.
I think 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, some number of weeks ago, someone asked us how to do some techniques in kind of explainer videos, and I think it was like a government building, and then the top came off, and then like a bunch of money came out. Like, whoa!
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it has all of the nuance of a 1600s political cartoon, but
Yeah.
anyway, if you want to have all the nuance of a 1600s political cartoon, and I know you do, you too will be able to achieve such things. But anyway, so those are kind of the two techniques I'll be talking about. Kyle, what do you bring for us today?
Well, since you were going to be tackling the 2D approach, I wanted to see what I could do using a 3D model in After Effects. So, of course, we could go into a 3D program and cut a 3D model into however many slices we want. But I wanted to see what we could do just staying within After Effects. And so here I am cutting a 3D model in half. You can see it's a 3D model because it turns, right? That's how I proved it. And then I'm cutting it in half. I could have done a zigzaggy cut, but I thought a straight one looked better. And then I'm again turning it to kind of prove it's still 3D. So that's where I ended up.
Yeah, if you don't turn it, it's not 3D. Let's all remember that.
Yep.
That's important. If you can't prove it, it might just be a picture of a 3D thing. Then you're a liar. So,
but it's not. Yep.
well, that is kind of the thing. It's like, because I know when the 3D model stuff, starts, like, well, I mean, why don't I just bring in like an image sequence or whatever? Like, well, because you can't rotate that into different angles. You can't make different choices later. So anyway.
Yeah. So I've this definitely has some limitations, but I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities here to be able to do this kind of technique with a thing that you can also still rotate. So, we'll check that out in a little bit here. And as always, the whole point of this show is that you ask us questions and then we try to answer them. So if you have questions about any of the examples that we're about to show you, let us know in the chat and we will try to dive into that detail of it instead of just talking about the things that we think are interesting.
No one can stop us. It's our show.
And to answer a very burning question in the chat, I don't believe that was Barney. I can see in our little shared Dropbox that is a picture of an Albertosaurus.
That's right. I'm keeping it Canadian over here, so you can enjoy. Kyle's always thinking about Canadian dinosaurs, It's just how it is.
There's a lot of good dinosaurs from Canada.
Yeah, because all of Alberta used to be the bottom of the ocean. So it's great. Lots of compression of fossils. Anyway, so speaking of fossils, let's get into After Effects and split some stuff apart. So if you wanted to do this sort of from scratch, step one, get a photo. I've got a photo of Kyle. So as we have plenty of photos of each other, I'm just going to go ahead and make a kind of a portrait size social media thing. And we'll call this image version show ! And so we want to be able to bring in sort of the thing. But if you were to bring in the layer itself, and then we're going to need a copy of that thing, and maybe you end up needing more copies. If you end up needing essentially 2 copies of the thing, you should pre-compose it. So that's just a helpful thing to think about. So I'm going to take this, pre-compose, and then we'll call this still image, right? That, and it keeps it the same color, which is pretty nice. So then my layer stuff doesn't get confused. But in this case, I went ahead and I isolated him from the background inside of Photoshop, that's a one-click solution over there. So, which I guess I could show, but we must move on.
You don't have it open. You just click remove background. That's all it is now. Yeah.
It's that quick. Now, we didn't get quite a lot of detail in his hair, but we're not going to worry about it because the heart and soul of this technique does not rely on that. But we want to isolate Kyle just in case I make duplicates of this stuff and then duplicates of this stuff. Oh boy.
Going with it.
Yeah. And then I use a curves to duplicate. And in case you want to deploy stuff onto this, it's going to affect all the copies at the same time. And that's exactly what we want. So we want to isolate Kyle's head. We can do a pretty bad job because it doesn't really matter. All of this space over and around it is all transparent. I like to use a technique of kind of progressive Bezier-ness whenever I need to isolate something. So you'll notice that I start by doing a pretty bad job, which is pretty normal for me. But then I do a slightly better job. So I like to make my mask color make it a nice bright pink so that we can enjoy looking at it. And I literally just click in some extra points, push them in, click an extra point, push it in. And then usually I'm working with this set to none so that I can click a point, pull it back out. There we go. I'm trying to decide how much of the beard am I keeping and whatever. And, you know, this is also a good opportunity to kind of redefine our jaw lines, which I think is something that, you know, a lot of men of a certain age
the beard is attempting to do that, but you're helping a little bit more.
Exactly. We're going to just kind of massage this around. Kind of a Doctor Strange pattern to your beard there. So, yeah. That's how you know that Kyle is a master of the mystic arts. So there you go. You set it back to add, kapoof. There you go. Now we've got a head, and that's exactly what we want. Now we could have done all that masking even inside of this.
Kind of depends on whether you're going to need to touch it again or not.
Exactly. Do you want it here? Do you want it there? Figure it out. But in this case, probably makes sense to have it inside because that's a nice place for it to be. Now, the actual cutting of things, I'm going to need 2 heads. Because 2 heads are better than 1. I'm going to duplicate this. One of them will be the top. One of them will be the bottom. And you have many options for slicing things. We could use a mask, but I prefer to use mats for this. And the reason I like to use the mats is it's going to give me a pretty useful kind of way to manipulate these things independent of each other. And in particular, I would like for this to sort of be something that I can move and change and have it kind of communicate between the 2 layers. And it's helpful if I just use one layer for that. So how about I just go ahead and make this, and then I'll go ahead and I'll give I'm basically going to make a really weird hat. So here we go. Here's a weird hat for Kyle, like that. As you can see, excellent. Well,
kind of looks like a chef's toque.
Yeah, exactly. Those chefs, they're always toking. And so this, let's call this the slice. And there's various other elements that I want to take with me from this. And one of them is if I have the slice, I want the remaining inside, because that part is interesting to me. And that is the ellipse without the shape. So I might as well go ahead and make that like red or something so that we can understand them in relation to each other. Now, both of these are going to be parented to the bottom. So as the bottom moves, they're going to move with it. And I'm going to make a duplicate of the slice, and that slice is going to go where the top goes. So we've got all of our parts. I hope everyone's with me so far. Let's just deal with them kind of one thing at a time. So this slice, I want to inform what I see of the bottom. And so I'm going to use this old mode track mat. We're going to come over here in the bottom. It's going to look at the slice. And so if we only see this, hey, that's not a bottom, that's a top. We'll hit the invert, kablam. Now we got the bottom. Same thing for this. We are going to make it look at slice 2. And now let's put that back and good to go. Everyone seemed to be parented to each other. So now I can move them apart. I'm going to bring back that remaining slice part. Boop, boop, boop. And then the remaining slice, I parented it, so it should be kaboom. There it is. So let's make sure that the top is on top of everything, and I'm already crushing it. So we can now move these things independent of each other to our hearts.
You got the interior. You should maybe make that not bright red. That's a little
horrifying.
Disturbing. Yeah.
All right, Kyle, we'll make it the true color of your regular human blood.
There we go. Yes. My human blood.
So yeah, we'll do it like Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country. So here we go. This is Klingon blood. It's purple now. I think in some versions the blood is still red. Anyway, so what transpires between these? Well, if the positions of them drift away from each other, we're going to end up sort of getting it to split apart. So I'm actually going to take top and bottom and shift parent that to the null so that the null will control both of them. And then if they just kind of move away, then that's going to be good. So it is worthwhile to take our position here and separate those dimensions so that our X and Y can be independent of each other.
I like when you accidentally move it down and it just compresses my face. There we go. Yes. That.
Yeah. That's good. You know, as soon as you lose the bridge of your nose, everything gets a little weird. And so, yeah, if we just kind of pop this up by a few pixels and we pop this down by a few pixels, we get a nice big gap. And if you want them to seem like they explode, then you want to come into your speed graph or your value graph, and we want to accelerate this. So this handle gets a little pull. You access your graph right here, and it's snapping apart. So there we go. We got a split happening. Now, the one thing that I wanted to really kind of drill down on this, and if you download the project file, you are going to get to enjoy all of the nitty-gritty.
Which you'll be able to do, 10 or 15 minutes after the show. These will be up over at motiondesignhotline.com.
Yeah. Real website, real people.
Mm-hmm. You get
really
the
good. Yeah. Well, because all of these things are kind of parented to their separate friends, if I move one of them, if I sort of move the remaining inside, whoa, that could be something, but that's not what we want. What I want is to have everybody kind of behave kind of similarly. So the remaining inside is going to be sort of the captain of our ship here. And what I want is the position, scale, and rotation of everybody else. I want to leave them all parented to their respective parents. They can all have the same parents. They're just all going to go to the same school. So the position of this is going to look at the position of that. The scale of this is going to look at the scale of that. The rotation of this is going to look at the rotation of that. Same thing for the top one. It's going to look at the position, and it's going to look at the scale, and it's going to look at the rotation. And because they're all parented to identical layers, then this will do what I want, which is to now rotate the slice. And you notice that the slice on both is rotating. So if I come in and decide, actually, I want it to be a slice kind of like this, so that we get one of his eyes and the bridge of his nose, and then that's fine. And then the thing from before, it's still splitting apart, and that looks perfectly great. So this is a little bit of rigging. Actually, maybe you want to split it like in the middle of the ear, like that.
And ultimately, this is kind of the reason to do a track matte approach. You can certainly link masks also, but doing it like this gives you a lot of control and flexibility there.
Yeah,
but at the cost of some extra layers.
Yeah, and especially because essentially if you go edge to edge on this thing, you then really have to resize these sort of kind of scalings that go on. Now, you may find like, now we're losing, my hat wasn't tall enough, I didn't tote enough. So, toque? That's the one. So
we also got some suggestions of it looking like a Pope hat, which I like.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's going on inside that dude's head?
Yeah.
Who knows? Probably a lot of like...
What if his head is actually like the full height of the hat?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. People don't know this, but the Pope is always the person with the most vertical skull.
I'm going to take a second, since we're on a weird tangent anyway.
Sure.
Penny Doodles is making some comments about this. Knowing how to use these layer parenting, but also connecting properties like this is a really good way to level up in After Effects, because then you're not moving 17 things independently. You can, like Evan just did, you can kind of say, this is the thing that's going to control all these other things. And so we'll link either those layers, or you can even just link properties, some properties, all the properties. And that way you can be mindful and build yourself a little rig that allows you to control many things with one thing, save you a lot of time and frustration.
Yeah. Speaking of, boing, there we go. That's working out. The other little tip that I'll say, yeah, we're 20 minutes in, yikes, is that you want to apply some overall motion to the whole ding-dang thing. So we've got this null, it's getting larger, whoa, and then the head's splitting apart. If we go back to the kind of original here, there's this kind of like shake, 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 boing, before things happen. That is really just being caused by a little Y position, and then a throw like that. So its value graph looks a little something like this, and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger before it breaks apart. That's the idea.
And if you're doing something, I mean, this is inherently kind of a goofy, cartoony, Monty Python sort of style. So lean into it and exaggerate stuff a bit like this.
Yeah, Montgomery Python themselves. So yeah, that's if you have a static photo. Now, if you've got some time with your subject, might I introduce you to something that uses a few more images? So this uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pictures. And I guess I used a whole 9 pictures. So to make this happen. So here, if we just, we'll look at it a little bit. My head splits apart. It comes back together. I look kind of perturbed that my head is split apart and then it's coming back together.
As one would.
Yeah, I guess it's not a normal thing for me. I try not to expose the inside of my flesh prison too often. So
I should have given you this 3D skull to put inside your face.
My head could have been full of 3D skulls. And there's a 3D skull inside of all of our heads. So we hope. So in here, like I say, it's 9 images. Now, what are those images? Let's double click on one and find out. There it is. We can go into this. Oh boy, things are getting even more convoluted. But here is me just looking. I'm looking straight. Then I turn my head a bit. Then I turn my head a bit. Then I turn my head a bit. And that's it. Then I turn my head this way and this way and this way. That's it. And didn't take a video. We didn't have to 3D scan. We didn't do any of that stuff. I'm just kind of looking around. This is me in my casual attire, when I'm...
And again, like, because we're doing sort of an intentionally cartoony look, that you can do a lower frame rate on those turns. If you needed it to be, every single frame, that's when maybe you do need to take a video or do a 3D scan or something. So understanding what you're aiming for helps you know what to create.
Yeah, and in this case, I was like, am I going to need 8, 12? I'm going to do the fewest I can get away with.
Yeah.
So I don't have a whole lot of time to get into all of the nitty-gritties because a lot of this is actually set up exactly the same way, that we need to define the space that the thing is, the space that it isn't, and that's really where kind of the biggest challenges of making this kind of thing happens. That we need to sort of align our things, our various frames with each other, that we want sort of the eyes, for example, to remain kind of on this same axis. And then it's worthwhile to kind of bring in the top of the head or maybe the mouth, or you want like reference points to try to keep things nice and aligned to each other as they're moving away. The other trick is to make sure that the two things are moving away from each other at a consistent and even amount for each of them. But what are those things? How do we make those? I did a lot of this with masks. So masking is a great way to define these spaces. And it sort of starts for me. Let's just solo this one. And I'll take my masks and we'll go ahead and set those to none. So you can see, yep, there I am, acting. I started by getting this blue line. And the blue here is really just defining the area that is head. And quite frankly, I probably didn't need to do such a good job around the ear or the jaw because none of that ultimately ends up mattering. The slice that I'm interested in for at least one of these is this one here. The one, actually, let's make this a more compelling color that we can enjoy. The area between the red and the blue. So if you think about it, the blue is what we want to keep. So the blue, we move that to be add. Hey! And then the red is not there. We're not going to see this part of my face, so I set that to subtract. Thumbs up. We're nailing it. And now, if I want to derive what the inside of that is, I simply duplicate this layer, call up its masks, and let's go ahead and only solo this one. Well, actually, let's see them both. But I'm going to fill this thing in with a color. Right, so that we can really see. And again, let's look at a nice, charming pink color like that. We're not adding and subtracting, we're adding and intersecting. So now I'm getting this part. So if I modify the blue line to become sort of what I think the inside of this should look like, I'm sort of just figuring it out. I'm making it up. I'm having a laugh. You may want to, with your blue line here, actually put a point a little bit closer to the seam of this if you wanted sort of a more abrupt...
Round it out a little bit.
Yeah, you get a little more abrupt change happening at the
But
seam.
ultimately, you're basically drawing the interior by hand.
Exactly.
And that's part of the reason you're doing fewer frames of it. But
But now I have that space sort of defined. This is the inside zone. And then that zone could serve as a mat for other layers. It could be just its own thing if you wanted it to be like that. If you were thinking, well, I'm going to put a big old gradio rampo on here, which is how we say that. And then we can, sure. One of us says gradio rampo. Because if you wanted to say, oh yeah, that's what the inside of my head is, it's full of gradient ramps, then that's something you could definitely just kind of make happen with your stuff. It's the world is your split in half oyster. You could do this to an oyster as well, I guess. But anyway, you get the idea that this layer now serves as the inside. And you simply do that again and again and again. Make sure you parent them together so that they behave together. And now the other part of this trick, we'll wrap up here real quick. How does it feel smooth and good? That's the big quandary. How do I make these feel smooth and good as they move away from each other? And part of that is that there is actually a very subtle little scaling and positional change that's happening to each of these kind of wedgies. So this wedge here is scaling a little bit. You see it's expanding a little and sliding. And here's like a trick. If I can give you guys one trick to take away from this, you have to think of some point of reference. And for me, that point was the back of the thing. And so for me, I know that the back of this will then continue when it clicks over to this one. It's going to drift. And then, we want them to be close. And so that line, if this line is continuing to move away at a fairly even rate between the two, and it's not like going out, in, out, in, out, in. That's not what you want. You want it to be kind of moving away, so it's going to feel like it's opening like a book. And then you can exaggerate that more if you want it to be kind of like moving further, faster. That's fine, right? That's no problem. But you want to kind of start with it just unfurling and then think about moving away from each other. Like compartmentalize the thing. I did so much of like selecting both sides and shifting them both and getting the gap between them to grow, and then worry about centering the gap that's between them, and then trying to make sure that this shape and this shape felt like mirrors of each other was the other thing. Even though no human head is symmetrical and it is grotesque and wrong to make that our beauty standards, we are all unique and beautiful objects on both sides of our faces, so keep that in mind. But with that further, let's go into Kyle's demonstration of the skeletal system. It's really hard for me not to dunk on phrenologists whenever we deal with the human skull. It's one of my favorite. I love absolute backwards bunk science from the ancient times, not as a thing to like, but as a thing to poke endless fun at for how dumb it is. Man,
I will point out a lot of medical devices from that time are very interesting looking and also quite horrifying.
Yeah. I'm afraid the problem is you have too much pressure inside of your various bile ducts. We better get it. We better go in and extract some. But anyway, ancient medical textbooks were written by leeches. So, Kyle, why don't we go ahead and start with your thing?
Yeah. So, as I said, I basically just wanted to take a 3D object of some kind. And I don't know, this kind of made sense to me to just sort of have an endless loop of something. And this is where I ended up. So give some credit here. I got this skull model from Sketchfab from Martin Yario. So thanks to Martin or Martinge. Maybe it's Martinge Ario. I'll never know. But thank you for this. So
unless they're watching and they can let us know right away.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a GLB that I downloaded from right there, and this is a full 3D model. I've got my draft 3D on. Let me go ahead and just turn this down a little bit because I'm, of course, streaming as well. So you can see this is a full 3D model. I can turn this thing around and do whatever I need to do with it, right? So how do we cut into this? It's not really a thing that you can do here in After Effects, but there are kind of a couple tricks that we can use. So what I decided that I needed to do is pre-compose this so that we would kind of have access to a couple things. And one of those things that you could do is get access to the depth information. So if you have your 3D object, you can just put it in a composition like this by itself, and then you could drag that into another composition and use that as a layer, and you don't necessarily need to do the collapse transformations here. And you do not want it to be a 3D layer, because then you will be rotating the flat version of this thing like this, and that's not going to be good, right? So instead, what you want to do, if you want to still be able to manipulate this thing, tell you what, I'm going to come over here and close Photoshop. I thought I would use Photoshop more than I ended up doing. I really was just making a seamless texture. I'm going to go ahead and close that, see if that gives me back a little bit of my computer bandwidth here.
Right.
And I think, yeah, close one other thing. All right. So what I ended up doing was I had my skull prepped here, and I opened up the Essential Graphics panel, and I put the X, Y, and Z rotation of this object, or in this case, I connected it to a null because I did some other things that I'll show you in a minute. And I put the X, Y, and Z rotation into the Essential Graphics panel. And you could certainly do your position or scale or whatever else. And that way, when you nest that into another composition, even just as a 2D layer, you still have access to that X, Y, and Z rotation of that 3D model inside the composition, even though this is not a 3D object here. So this is kind of the key to be able to still have that interactivity here, okay? So if you just want to cut away sort of the front of this thing, then one way you could do that is come into these 3D channel effects, and you can get the depth data out of this thing. So you could try the depth matte effect. So you'll just apply that, and then you get a depth and a feather. So I'm just going to start cranking up this depth until I start slicing into the thing. There we go. And so let's say that that's the depth we want. And you'll see that I still have the ability to turn this thing. That depth is going to be a consistent distance away from, I'll say, the camera. We don't actually have a camera right now, but effectively, like, you know, sort of our eyes or the portal through which we're viewing this thing, right?
Through
depth
the
matte,
infinite portal of
yeah,
the virtual understanding, yes.
And as Sean said, yes, it turns, it's 3D.
Yeah.
I'm proving it to you.
That's
so
how you know.
depth matte is just giving you basically a slice at a set distance from, you know, flat view here, and then it's cutting into the thing right there. So if we wanted to just sort of cut into this thing like that, we could do that. Let's go ahead and set this back to 0, just so we're kind of getting the straight on view. And you could do this with any 3D object. So let's say that this is going to be our back, and I think that's a pretty good depth here, so that I could duplicate this thing. Let's go ahead and name them real quick as back and front. And then on the front, I could just click invert. And now I have one version of this that is only the front and one version that is only the back.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I could, if I wanted something to exist inside there, make another duplicate of the front and call that inside. And then let's just, for the sake of visibility here, we'll fill that. And you could use whatever color or texture or whatnot that you'd like. And so then when you move the front, you see the fill. And so you could stylize this as you like. You could use this as a matte for a texture of some kind. So let's say I have this, where are we? This one here. Yeah, let's say you wanted this grungy texture to be the thing that is inside here. Scale this way down. And so you could say, I want this to use that fill as a track matte, and now we could have that texture inside this skull, and you just need to make sure that your layering is correct, and now you can, you know, open a thing up and reveal it. The limitation here is that you only get this flat surface like this. If you rotate the thing, and of course I have a couple different copies of this now, so it's going to start getting messy, but this is another instance where it would be good to start linking things together. Even within these essential properties, I could say that maybe all of these are going to take their X, Y, and Z rotation from that one copy so that I don't have to keep updating them, right? So these are going to all be driven by that. And so I could rotate this, but you'll see I'm going to get that same effect that I got before where, it's going to rotate, but it's going to keep that consistent depth. So, I do think this is interesting and it has applications. It's just not very flexible.
Right. And there's no way to essentially turn the plane on which we
Yeah.
measure depth
Yeah.
from is the problem.
I tried. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to let us know. But this is just the way that depth mat works. So there's certainly a world where I could, without any sort of effects here, you could turn this thing the same way Evan was turning his face, and you could manually draw your layers. But I wanted to try and do this procedurally. So
yeah. Nothing stops anyone from doing all the work with their own human hands.
Right.
Nothing can stop you. I want to say I like depth Mac. Maybe that's something.
Oh,
Maybe that
nice.
sounds like a character of some kind.
We'll hang on to that one.
But people of the chat, if you come up with creative uses of the 3D object import, it's a fairly new thing. So we want to hear about what you're doing. We want to see what you're making. Always send them at East Abrams, at Kylosaurus, and we want to see what you're making, what you're doing. We are
always love to see what people do with the ideas that we are putting out into the universe here.
We're always very proud to kind of share out what people make. We're also on the Blue Sky, so if you send us things over there, we're happy to push that out to the people. And I don't know, let's try to share more of each other's work out there in the world. We want to see what you're doing.
So I thought to myself, I would like to be able to have at least some more control about that slice that I'm making. And so my thought was to create a shape layer. In this case, I just did a rectangle. And let me zoom out a little bit and rotate so that I can show you what's happening. I extruded that shape layer because I am, of course, using the advanced 3D render, which is required to be able to use 3D models. And in that, you can extrude shape layers and text layers. So here's that shape layer, and then I just extruded it. And now you can see I basically made a box over half of that skull, okay? And so now I've found a way to slice it at the place that I want. I stuck it right in the center because that's what made sense. Let me go ahead and just reset that camera. So I made one for this side, and I made one for the other side, which is magically visible now. Well, the other side exists too. You'll have to take my word for it, I guess. I don't know what to tell you.
You turn it off and on in the essential properties, right? Maybe.
Well, I did, but the opacity should be working. Anyway, so once again, I put the opacity sliders for these into the essential graphics panel so that I can access those when this is used in other compositions. So then I brought this in. And here's our skull. Nothing fancy here, just doing some animation with it, kind of like I just showed you. But then let's solo one of these fellas. And let's go ahead and turn this off. So there is that thing that I just showed you, right? But then if you use a little bit of compositing thoughts, I could set this layer to screen, and that will make the black transparent. And so if I do that times 2, then I have that other opacity has decided to be strange all of a sudden. What the heck? Anyway, well, I mean, you can see what's happening there, where it gives you the version of this thing with that black box attached to it, but you can composite that away so that it doesn't, it isn't visible. Okay. I'm really curious to figure out why this is magically not working all of a sudden. It's right there. Because that is going to have a pretty big effect on all the things that we're going to see from here.
You always just close it and open it up again, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. Tell you what, maybe let me just do a quick purge here. And yeah, 84 gigs in my cache. That might have a little something to do with it too.
Notice you haven't purged recently.
Hmm. So let's just test real quick and see if that comes back. Well, it doesn't want to. So we'll just roll with it. It creates sort of a different look, but here we are. So I've done my animation for this thing, and the right side is supposed to only be half the skull, but it magically broke. So here we are. And so you can see I'm just moving them away from one another. Why? That's going to frustrate me. But so I created one movement here that can be loopable, and then I can stick the thing inside. So let me just solo these. So without some of the other, there's some color effects on here. I'm just using tritone and some curves. And so with just a little bit of offsetting, you're just creating a loopable version of the thing that's kind of an endless loop of these skulls, being behind one another so that they keep getting revealed, right?
That's right. Kyle and I have fairly large caches of stuff. Large portions of our hard drive are given over to accessing stuff. Is that healthy? No, probably not. But anyway.
So I did, because of the way this is built, I did need to kind of separate this to basically get rid of the black. Because in this example, the black is kind of all, it does exist here, okay, even though I'm compositing it away. So I stuck this into another pre-comp where I basically matted this on itself. I used a copy of this and I cranked the levels so that I get pure white and pure black, and then used that as a matte for itself. And then just a little bit of choking in that edge with a simple choker here. I've turned the resolution down. It left just a little bit of this black edge, so I just made an adjustment layer, trimmed that in just a little bit. It's fine. It's fine. But this is also why at the beginning I made sure that I had a full version of the thing, because otherwise you would see the split, because there'd be kind of a little like half to 1 pixel split in between them. But once they're moving apart, yeah. Once they're moving apart, you can't see it.
Yeah, that reminds me of something. If we have time, we'll go back to my screen real quick by the
end. This halftone situation is a whole other ball of wax. So I don't know how much I'm going to get into this, but I will say that I'm again using the skull itself with quite a bit of effects on it. But there it is, just making it white. And then I used Minimax to push out the edges a little bit here. And then I roughened those up so it gets a little blurby. And then I blurred that whole thing. And then I also made a layer that is a little bit of sort of interior goopiness, so that when this separates, it would have a little bit of pull to it, okay? So then I'm using another layer and some effects to basically combine those into one thing so that I can feed this blobby white thing into a camera lens blur, which if you want to see more on this technique, Ben Marriott has a halftone tutorial, and this is kind of a riff on his formula. So you can kind of get that step by step. But basically, I'm using that white and black thing I created for a camera lens blur that then drives this CC ball action.
Ooh.
Yeah, there we go.
Ball action's back.
CC ball action, which just makes a bunch of balls. And you kind of fine tune those to get the dot size that you like here. I liked them small. Added some wiggle and whatnot so they get kind of randomized. But that's what's going on there. A few more effects to kind of crunchitize it back down and make it look kind of cruddy and grungy. So, well, as you... Go ahead.
And Penny's saying we get a lot of use out of that skull, and I think that's one of the I don't know, big takeaways of doing procedural stuff. It's like
Hmm.
you're nesting it down.
Yeah.
How can we
Now
then
you can use it
that
5
nest?
different ways to be itself, but also loop with itself, and then create stylized copies that you can use to composite in. Exactly.
Yeah, the more you can avoid having to recreate the root of the thing, the happier you're gonna be at the
Yeah.
end of the thing. Because really, at the end of the day, someone could come around and say, "Kyle, we didn't want skulls. It's pineapples now."
And
Right?
I could
Like,
literally go back to this original comp and drop a pineapple in here, and I might need to make some adjustments, but overall, the whole thing should just work.
hmm like it's very useful to be able to kind of work procedurally in
Yeah.
those ways,
Yeah.
like in a way that my examples really don't, right? That you
Out of
because
necessity, though.
Yeah, because mine are made of image sources or whatever.
Hmm.
If you deviate from them, you have to redraw all the masks, right? If you
Yeah.
deviate from
Yeah.
what Kyle's got, you can just change the root and then it propagates change. Anyway, something.
Which kind of allows you to work in a very different way,
Mm,
where I was able to go through and basically build the animation like this. I kind of knew I was going to segment out the skull so that I could use it in these other ways, but I focused on kind of this looping, the split and loop, and getting that timing down. And then I could come back and sort of start adding on style and extra copies and all that. Whereas you taking a very sort of manual approach, you have to really like I had the ability to play with this, but you
yeah,
have to decide what you're doing and lock that down before you really start adding any of the
yeah, yeah.
style.
So yeah, just in terms of people are thinking about, well, will I do it this way? Will I do it that way? I think the other thing to think about is like Kyle's using a scary skeleton, but it could be various iterations of sneakers, right? This is
Yeah.
great for kind of product stuff that you want to show off, because these could all be like several different SKUs of product, right? Air Jordan colorway,
Yep.
new Air Jordan colorway, type
Yeah. Yeah, you don't
and
have to loop the same thing. Each of these copies could be a totally different thing, or even just, changing the color each time, whatever it may be.
mm,
Um, Anda is suggesting that Michael Ponch also has a good halftone. I know Jake in Motion, our good friend Jake Bartlett, also has a good halftone. There's a couple different approaches. I actually watched a couple of them to kind of refresh myself on how different people did it, and then
yeah,
sort of combined and riffed on those until I got the thing that I wanted.
hmm
Um, so just to kind of point this out, this halftone comp also has quite a few properties added to the essential graphics so that I could dial in this look, because I wanted to have the halftones in a few different colors, and I want those different colors to have different settings. So one of the things I fed was a random seed control so that some of the things that are wiggling and randomized, I could feed it sort of different versions of that randomness, so that when this comes into that looping comp, each of these groups here, you'll see there's kind of a repeating pattern of threes. Good reason to color code. And so each of these is just a group of the same thing, right? And so let me undo my soloing there and just solo one of these. So you can see one instance of our skull, even though it's, misbehaving on my little mat there. I've got the skull, and then I've got a yellow halftone, and then I've got a blue halftone that's underneath there.
mm,
And you can see as this separates, you get that extra goopiness. It's really misbehaving since my skull is complete there, but I wanted it to have kind of a little bit of that pull as it came apart, even if it's just sort of subtle,
mm.
just so it wasn't like a clean separation there. But these are very kind of randomized, so like every frame they're kind of jumping around, and so it gives it that grungified look. And then eventually you bring that into the final composite and add some other textures behind it. I've got this background that loops, which is just I made this in Photoshop, but it's just a texture that I tiled, kind of filled in the middle, so I could just run offset on this forever and make it work. And then several layers of kind of grungified textures with some wiggle and all that. I guess because I soloed everything. I was like, where did it all go? And then eventually you get to this version of the thing, or, as close to it as it wants to cooperate to be right now.
Yeah. Sometimes things just seem to really, especially when you get like animations and stuff going on, that things can kind of weird on our OBJ GLB situations, but it's all in process. Okay. I just wanted to jump over to my screen real quick to point out something if we got time. There's the Evan screen.
I left you a few minutes to do it, so here we are.
Thank goodness. So, because when you mentioned seams, that really reminded me of something important. That when you are defining, where is it in here? It is this one. Can I expand this anymore? Or no, I guess not. These are just scrunched into each other.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
So this head, I'm going to set this to normal and zoom in, and you see we have a very tiny slice across our subject's head. So this is why we end up using something like an alpha add, or we end up having to kind of push these things kind of together to try to make that seam. Oh, maybe I pushed them apart. Anyway, the point is...
And you could, of course, make a copy of the thing that isn't sliced and have that up until the point that it slices, which is effectively what I did. But then it's a third thing that you need to make sure is connected and all that.
Yeah, because there is a kind of rude pixel tear that happens in this area kind of between two things. So the alpha add is one such way that we sort of close that gap. Because if I pinch it, I'm just trying to show.
Yeah.
Like, even though I've pinched it by barely a pixel, right? To kind of slice that through. But we know that it doesn't quite line up. And if I guess it kind of goes away. But like, that type of subpixel problem can often be solved with the alpha add sort of thing, right? That's our little solution. Now, generally this is for weird subpixel seams that don't kind of work, and hopefully that's what gets it. So yeah.
Good call out there.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh yeah. Or Theo suggesting or an adjustment layer on top with a median.
Yeah, and so depending on kind of your organization of stuff, that'll kind of get you there. So yeah, hopefully those are useful tips. I know we got like 3 or 4 minutes before we're cut off, so that's probably a good place to leave it here. Doc, I got a pixel tear. Got anything for that? Yeah, just take 2 alphas and call me in the morning. So this is Motion Design Hotline. If you have problems in motion design, you can get at us and we'll try to help you out. Next week, we are going to be talking more about collage things, I believe. As the American Thanksgiving seems to be a time of creating centerpieces for your table and cutting turkeys out of paper around your hand and ripping off Mr. Bean sketches on popular sitcom Friends. We're going to be getting into stuff like that. So we're going to be getting into kind of collage-y things based on a viewer suggestion. Listener suggestion was to talk more about collage stuff. So that's what we'll be doing next week with a focus on the theme of everyone's favorite colonial pastime, Thanksgiving. Appreciate more tongue-in-cheek humor like this. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else to tell the people about, Kyle?
I don't think so. Thanks everybody for watching as always. And just if times are weird, remember that making creative stuff is good for you and often good for other people too. So
that's true. So until next time, I'm Evan Abrams. You can find me at EC Abrams. He's Kyle Hammer. You can find him at Kylosaurus Rex. You can find more of Motion Design Hotline. You can go back in time and watch the whole archive. It's nicely documented over on motiondesignhotline.com, our real website for real people. Get yourself the project files. So hopefully those will be useful. If there are parts of it that you wanted to dig into, these will be available. You can do that. You can slice all of our heads in half and see what's inside there and be aghast that it's less than you imagined, but more than you hoped. That's sort of what we're up to. If you have problems, use the form, send them to us. We'll try our best to help you out. That's what we like to do. We kind of have an idea of our schedule, so we'll be here right up until the winter holidays, I believe. So that's what we'll be doing moving into the future. But yeah, until next time, stay creative, be kind to each other, and we will see you all around the internet.
Thanks, everybody. Plenty of more good stuff coming up on Adobe Live.
Oh, that's
Stick
true.
around.
There's a rich, full day of activities going on. I totally forgot. We got Design Blitz after this. We got, getting started with Project Neo with,
Yeah,
with
that's
Howard.
good
So
stuff.
if you liked 3D things and you want to make your own 3D stuff and you want to do it on the internet, you can do it there. Anyway, I'm overrunning, so we already said goodbye. Bye.